I want to start this video by saying I am very pro accessibility to GLP-1s, and we're in a time where it's very hard for the people who need these medications to get them. That said, there's this debate that's been raging about compounds, and I don't want to be on the sidelines about this because I think it's a really important thing to talk about. It's just not something that I talk about a lot on my channel. So I shared with you earlier how the Obesity Society is hosting Obesity Week 2023 in Dallas right now. The Obesity Society is a big advocacy group for obesity worldwide, right? And it's where a lot of medical professionals with a focus on obesity get together and discuss the issues that are pertinent to dealing with this epidemic that's going on. So I told you earlier how I'm kind of FOMOing and wanting to be there next year. I want to be there in person. So I've been doing as anybody would that wants to be there. I've been FOMOing and following along on Twitter. And I see a very interesting thread emerging about compounds. So hat tip to Elaine Chen over on Twitter who shared this, but this is really interesting. She shared this, which is basically a picture of the Wegovy booth right behind a compounding booth. So this is all at this expo that takes place here around this Obesity Week conference. Very interesting that the Obesity Society allowed a compounder in, and this is very overt. They've got compounded semaglutide front and center. Very interesting. Then we have a very interesting discussion ensuing on Twitter by some of the other doctors attending, and I think it's a really, really, really incredibly important conversation to happen. Something that I've talked about openly on YouTube and on Twitter about these compounds is that I don't think we're dealing with exactly the same version of semaglutide and tirzepatide, and this doctor points it out in a very doctory way. He says, first off, is compounding pharmacies really buying semaglutide that is conjugated to a long fatty acid side chain? Or are these pharmacies just selling the peptide sequence itself, right? So we've talked about this a lot on my channel because my feeling is if they're selling the version that doesn't have the fatty acid sequence, and the same can be said of tirzepatide because kind of similar thing going on with tirzepatide. It changes the whole medication. The fatty acid really deals with the stability of the peptide itself and how a person is able to absorb the medication itself. Obviously, if it doesn't have this fatty acid chain, which is what helps kind of slow down the absorption of the medication, then you've got a different dosaging schedule that would be needed. So anyway, I dropped something in this guy's comments. We'll see if he responds, but I think this is exactly the kind of conversation that needs to be taking place because while we all do want access, and while compounding does provide that access, there are just questions that have remained unanswered, and that's why I'm not like the go-to source on compounds because I just think there's so many things that are unanswered, and I am excited for this conversation to take place. I think you should be too, especially if you're on compounds, because a lot of people are seeing a lot of success on compounds, but we should be able to know the risks, right? So I'm glad that these conversations are happening. I know this is a really, this compounding guy showing up to this show has been a real feather ruffler because there's so many opinions about this within the medical community, and frankly I'm just here for it. If you found this video interesting, make sure that you follow my channel here. This is the kind of content you're going to get here, continue to get here, and I hope that you'll follow along with the journey.